So after that whole CHOP thing went down, there was this big uproar over all of the texts that had been sent between the various leadership groups of, the police, the fire department, and the mayor at the time, Jenny Durkin. Miraculous, and a handful of other people at the Seattle Police Department, major leaders. And the weird thing is all of their text messages regarding what was going on at CHOP and how CHOP went down, they all just disappeared. Well, we had a tech setting that got changed. I dropped my phone in the water. My phone broke. Every now and then I delete my texts. Yeah. And why is this important? Because there's a number of lawsuits going on, and it is illegal for public officers, those in public office, to delete their texts like this. There's a thing called record keeping. And if you don't keep the records, it can be a felony criminal charge. That's what we're dealing with today. The King County Prosecutor requests criminal probe of missing texts of former Mayor Jenny Durkin, the police chief, the fire chief, and a handful of other folks in the Seattle Police Department. So, yeah, King County Prosecutor kind of came down to him, and he's like, all right, let's do this. Let's go. Let's see. Now, it's just a probe, so we don't really know. But just the fact that this is happening, I felt was super interesting. Because the way that this whole thing went down, all these texts are just gone, and we don't have a clear picture because most all of the stuff, the decisions that were made with the East Precinct during CHOP to be emptied out with the police officers, hey, you guys got to give up your office, you got to give up your precinct. How did all that go down? Via text message, because they're just, stuff is on the fly happening like right now. There's no time for email. Phone calls are too brutal. You need a really super quick answer. You text Mayor 𝐏𝐞𝐸𝐬 of the fire department, or you text the mayor, hey, what are we doing here? Yeah, that's it. So when those texts all miraculously just disappeared, well, there was an investigation, and they found that some of the record keeping, just wasn't on the up and up, and the Seattle Times literally sued the city of Seattle, and a bunch of stuff came up, but nothing really happened as a result. I think the city had to pay a $200,000 fine, or they settled a $200,000 court case with the Times. But everybody else kind of looked around and went, what? That doesn't really answer our question. The fact that you're wanting to, do better as far as your record keeping goes, that's great and all, but what happened with all those texts? Where's the information in those texts? Well, now we're going to get, we're probably not going to get those texts back, but we're going to get an idea of what actually happened. So now we've got a criminal probe of what went down with those texts in CHOP. Let's take a quick peek. Let's see what the dealio is, right? King County Prosecutor's Office does not typically request criminal investigations by law enforcement. But because normally they don't need to, right? But outgoing Prosecutor Dan Satterberg is making an exception in the case of the missing text messages of Seattle's former mayor. It's not just the mayor, too. Mayor Chief Best, or former Police Chief Best, like I said, Fire Chief 𝐏𝐸𝐬, and just a bunch of other people at the very highest levels of the police department. On July 28th, Dan Satterberg asked King County Sheriff Cole Tyndall to put together a structured investigation into the missing text messages. And we've been told the sheriff's office has done so. All right, said Satterberg spokesperson 𝐏𝐞𝐸𝐬 in an email statement to �KIRO News Radio. So I watched the interview with 𝐏𝐶 That's a handful of a last name, isn't it? And they're going after whatever information they can get a hold of. And it's a criminal investigation because what happened here was illegal. Laws were probably broken. Now, whether it was an accident, and I talked about this at the time, after CHOP was over and everybody was just kind of reeling with, did that really just happen? Did all of that go down? And you got to believe that there was a concerted effort to, hey, you know what? Why don't you delete all those text messages? I mean, there's some liability here, and it went from the summer of love to where a couple of kids got killed, and it just went wildly sideways, right? It just went wildly sideways. So it was no longer identified as the summer of love. It was the summer of, oh my gosh, we need to delete these messages because this might not end up well. And that's where we sit. And the odds of these individuals, call it, maybe there's 6 individuals here. The odds of these 6 individuals all miraculously having their text messages deleted are, I threw that out and somebody sent back to me, well, a viewer sent it back to me. Well, I did a quick calculation. It's like 4 billion to 1. And I'm like, so what you're saying is that there's a chance? I mean, no, yeah, I believe this is a cover-up. I do. At some level, some of these texts, they were flat out deleted because the end result, the optics of what went down here probably opens the city up to some liability. That is just my opinion. I have no proof of this. I just have what I read in the media, just kind of like you. But I've been following this case for quite a while. And the way that it ended up, it really left me wondering, going, well, what did go down there? So I'm excited to see, even if nothing really comes of this. All right, prosecutor dude, you give this a shot. Let's see what you come up with. As first reported by the Seattle Times, a spokesperson for Sheriff Cole Tyndall confirmed that department was in the early stages of reviewing the matter, offering no additional detail. I'm okay with that. Just let us know. I wonder how long this would take to do an investigation like this. Is it a year? Is it 6 months? I don't even know. Last year, a whistleblower revealed that 10 months after Durkin's texts had vanished, including from the period in 2020 when the city was contending with racial justice protests over the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, the creation of the CHOP riots, and the abandonment of the Seattle Police Department East Precinct. So there was a whistleblower, and they basically, was it somebody at the Seattle Times? I think was who came up with this, and it was the response to these inquiries regarding the missing text messages. It was the response that the city actually got in trouble for, not the deleting of the text messages. It was the way they handled the record-keeping response. Going off memory there, I'm pretty sure that was the case. Later, the Seattle Times uncovered several other city leaders also had not kept their text messages from roughly the same period. Because if we could get a hold of those text messages, do you think we might have a little bit better understanding of who said what and when regarding the whole CHOP thing? So, I mean, with the folks that had their messages, quote unquote, deleted or their phones lost, or, when you lose a phone, those text messages should still be on your account. But what they claimed is that settings got changed, so we're no longer saving. These are all iPhones. These are not Android people, right? I mean, these are government leaders that are older, and they're not going to be running around with Android. I run around with an Android because I'm a business guy. And, Apple products were, back in my day when I was, up and coming, you didn't use an Apple product because that was designed for education and the artists, not business dudes. And that's why you'll still see a lot of business dudes, older business dudes, not using an iPhone, including then Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, Seattle Fire Department Chief Harold Scoggins, and several Seattle Police Department commanders. All right, so we're commander level dudes. Miraculously, 6 of them just had all their text messages gone. Don't know what happened. Summer of love made me do it. Texts of elected and public officials are public records and must be retained for at least 2 years. Knowingly destroying them is a felony under state law. Are we gonna throw former Mayor Jenny Durkin in jail under a felony? No, I don't think we're headed that direction. But I think we might get a little bit better idea of whether the excuses that they have come up with are legit or semi-legit or not legit at all. And maybe this was just a freak happening, but I honestly don't think so. something tells me this is a fishy story. I mean, it just does, right? You're going to tell me that they all had their text messages just something happened. It's like when you argue with your kid and you just know you've got them back against the wall on the facts. And then they just throw out something just ridiculous. And you're like, you're really going to tell me that? Like you dropped your phone in the ocean. All right. Technology, that stuff. No, that might have happened, but that's not an excuse for why your text messages are missing. So what are we doing? The Times eventually sued the city over the missing texts, a lawsuit that settled earlier this year with the city, agreeing to pay nearly $200,000 while creating a series of reforms in releasing and retaining records. I was upset when I read this. I'm like, that doesn't really give me any answers. I want to know what happened to those texts. I want to know, did somebody say, hey, you know what? This is a big enough issue. City's got enough liability, because I do believe the city has some massive liability for what went down at CHOP. You got an area in the United States and North America where you tell the police department, you're in a no-fly zone, folks. You guys are out of there. And the cops didn't want to leave. I was texting with a bunch of cops. They didn't want to leave. That's their office. You want to leave your office to give it up to, your sworn enemy? Your nemesis, which was, a bunch of just freaky protesters who whined and complained when they got tiny little bit of tear gassing. The city admitted no fault with this lawsuit. With Durkin out of office and Best stepping down, the demand for answers and accountability had somewhat dissipated. But inquiring minds want to know. But not Satterberg, who noted multiple people calling for accountability as part of the reason he asked for the criminal investigation. I want to know what's going on. I think a lot of people want to know what's going on. The whole thing just reeked of cover up. But, and I say that kind of in jest, because I don't really know. None of us really knows. But it's just the odds of this happening to so many different people at such high levels of leadership. They've got to be slim to none. And that's what makes me think, all right, I don't have any real proof of this, but my instinct tells me something just ain't right here, right? The case had never been referred to us, and typically we don't ask for an investigation to be conducted, Satterberg said in a statement to 𝐏𝐞𝐸 News Radio. But in recent weeks and months, I heard from people in the community that this matter was important to them, and I considered it my responsibility to make this request to the sheriff before the end of my term. So this guy's he's gonna go down this road and just see, what the dealio is. So there was an analysis done on Durkin's phone. The analysis found Durkin's phone had been set manually in July of 2020 to auto-delete text after 30 days. Okay, but it didn't determine who changed the setting. It's one of those things, there's no footprint on who made the settings change. There's just isn't. You got a phone, somebody changes it. But the issue then is, okay, so that's July of 2020. CHOP had already taken place by then, and CHOP was shut down, I believe, August 1st. Was it August 1st or was it July 1st? Maybe it was July 1st. I can't remember. It was somewhere right in there. So this explanation to me was like, okay, but there should be a whole bunch of text prior to that leads us to know exactly what happened. The former mayor said she did not change the setting, and the city's IT department managed maintenance and configuration of her phones and had worked on it that July. Interesting. So the IT department said it was not its policy to change the retention settings on the phones. Well, that's because it's a felony offense to do so, anything less than 2 years, right? I mean, you got to retain these somehow. And I don't know how they retain the text messages of elected officials, because I don't retain any text message. I mean, not really sure how you do that, but I guess you back it up somewhere on some kind of drive, somewhere. So Beth said in an earlier deposition that she had periodically deleted text messages, and the analysis backed that up. Did she believe that her texts were being backed up elsewhere? Some kind of backup drive, some kind of backup server? It's really unclear. She's the chief of police. This is Chief Best. So you would think of all people who would be clear on record keeping, it would either be the chief of police or possibly, the mayor at the time. Hey, Miss Mayor, don't delete those texts. That's a felony. And she is the mayor, Jenny Durkin, is a former federal prosecutor. Let that sink in. She's a former federal prosecutor. All right. She had to know. She knew what was going on. There's something in here that just doesn't jive. And so now you've got, King County Prosecutor going, I don't think this jives as well. Let's do a little probe here. Let's do a little probe and just see what we come up with. I'll be very curious to see. Maybe nothing comes of this. All right. You gave it a run. But you got to have some kind of answers other than the 6 or whatever of them just had a freak occurrence and all those texts are gone from that period. I mean, who could have guessed that from happening? Don't know what the odds of that are. Very, very low of happening. I mean, damn near impossible, right? And I think that's what everybody was thinking. Like, you're gonna just tell us that, like, without even, smiling or laughing about the fact that you're telling us that somehow all these texts just disappeared. The optics. I talk about optics a lot because they're what's most important, right? In real estate, every image is everything. The image of a home, how it's portrayed, how it looks, because that's what people base it on. That's what people judge it on. Optics and social media. That's what everybody judges you on. How do things look? Do they look like they're on the up and up? Well, in this case, I'm going to go with no, not at all. Something's fishy. Something's going on. Again, my opinion, but that's why you're here, to hear my opinion. My opinion says not all is well within, leadership at this point in time. And I think they realized it shortly after the whole thing went down. And you had 2 kids whose lives were ended, a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. You think you might have a little bit of liability? You think you might have some unlawful, death lawsuits? You got some lawsuits by homeowners of condos in that area. You got some lawsuits by business owners. I know, one of those business owners. And it was a very difficult time for anybody trying to run a business in CHOP. Let's see, I'm going to sell a bunch of stuff, but I've got no police protection. And if something goes sideways at my store or my restaurant, good luck to me, because calling 911, as we saw with the 19-year-old who had his life ended, Horace Anderson, I mean, cops couldn't come and clear out a pathway. They couldn't secure the scene for ambulance and EMT people to come in to save this 19-year-old kid who got shot. And as a result, he passed away. I mean, Antifa took him as best they could. And, the whole thing is just so messed up. And there's some liability there. There's some massive liability and there's some massive lawsuits, I think, still waiting to be resolved. We'll just have to see how it goes. But I've also seen that a number of the businesses in those lawsuits have pulled out. And so, their attorneys have probably said, hey, you can keep funding this bad boy lawsuit and you're probably right, but it's going to make you go under financially. So, here's what we're looking at. We're looking at another 3 years. We're looking at another $2 million in attorney's fees. I don't know what it is, but it's spread out between a bunch of businesses and a bunch of homeowners and citizens just in the area. Hey, if you guys want to keep funding this lawsuit, you can, but here are your odds. I believe an attorney has said, here are your odds. Here's what it's going to take just in lawyer fees, whether you get, a judgment in your direction or not. This is what it's going to cost. Is this worth it to you to continue this lawsuit? And I think businesses are saying, we flat out can't afford it. And that's a lot of times what happens is those who have the deepest pockets in a lawsuit, they prevail because they are last man standing. I mean, former, president number 45, he was a perfect example of that. He would sue people and he had the pockets to, let's go to court. That's fine. I'll see you in court. A lot of real estate guys do that. All right, that's fine. We disagree. I'll see you in court. It's kind of that ultimate showmanship. I got a bigger one. I got a bigger one than you. Let's go to court. Let's find out. Let's let the judge decide who has the bigger one. And that's literally what happens. So I was excited to see this probe. Got a little probey probe going on. What will come of it? I have no idea. Can we expect anything from a probe like this? I mean, maybe some more answers, but are they really going to go after a former police chief? Are they really going to go after a former mayor? I don't know. We'll have to see. Stay tuned right here on News for Reasonable People, because this is what we're talking about. So the article goes on to say, Durkin and Best have not responded to requests for information that we hit them up with several days ago. They got to say that, right? They got to say that. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But do stay tuned. Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.